I would like to welcome our next speaker, Tracy Doig from Freedom from Torture. Tracy is the head of international advocacy and accountability for freedom from torture. She has over 20 years' experience of advocating for human rights and social justice in both grassroots and global organizations. Tracy.
Thanks very much, and thank you to Tamils for Labour for inviting us here today. It's great to be amongst such a well-educated and erudite crowd, and I hope that my contributions will add something to the conversation. As was said in the introduction, I come from Freedom from Torture, which could be said to be the world's largest rehabilitation centre for survivors of torture. Sri Lankan nationals make up our largest client group and have done for the last decade or so. Since 2009, our doctors have forensically documented cases of torture relating to over 550 Sri Lankan nationals, the overwhelming majority of whom are Tamil. Since the cases since 2015 have included, all of the people that have been documented cases of torture have included physical torture, such as burning, beating, asphyxiation, and the majority have faced psychological torture and sexual torture, including rape. This is not something that is a one-off. This is a pattern of torture that has been used for decades in the country to suppress and subdue both minority groups and those who find themselves in the criminal justice system. But what is incredibly shocking to us is that in our patterns of documenting torture patterns across the globe, we're becoming increasingly concerned about the rise of authoritarianism, including in so-called democracies. Now, you could say that Sri Lanka is perhaps one of the most egregious examples of this, where previously elected presidents like Donald Trump or Jair Bolsonaro support torture. They openly call for the use of torture. But in Sri Lanka, you have somebody who's credibly accused of war crimes and atrocity crimes actually elected to be president. The cycles of impunity throughout, for the last decades in Sri Lanka, continue to be of concern to the survivors, the torture survivors that we see that come through our doors in our centres across the country. And it's why we continue to speak at events like this and to push the British government to change their very mixed messaging that they're giving, which Melissa and other speakers have alluded to. But I perhaps will raise a couple of points that are of particular concern to us, as well as supporting the calls for the use of targeted sanctions and the revision of the GSP Plus trade initiatives. We are also really deeply concerned about the Police Scotland's training of Sri Lankan police. The fact that, as Melissa says, it's been going on for over 15 years without any credible security sector reform is something that the British government and Police Scotland should really be thinking twice about. And we would be urging the Labour Party to join us in our campaign to end this training once and for all. We're also, as well, whilst the UK government has been playing a leadership role at the UN Human Rights Council, as we said, whilst Sri Lanka remains a human rights priority country for the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, as it's now known, what we notice, what's quite startling, is how the Home Office continues to use poor country policy information note relating to Tamils in their asylum decision making. The fact that the Tamil Country Policy and Information Note is based on a fact-finding mission report that took place 1 month before Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected as president, and that information in which they say that everything is fine for Tamils in Sri Lanka is currently being used to assess Tamil asylum seekers' refugee protections is something that is quite shocking, and that should be revisited. Equally concerning to us is what we call the anti-refugee bill, the Nationality and Borders bill that's currently going through Parliament, which really drives a coach and horses through the global refugee protections that exist to protect all of us in our moments of weakness. This bill, if it is passed, will criminalize people who are seeking protection on these shores who arrive irregularly. Now, this includes Tamils who have been on the boats crossing to these shores. It will mean that torture survivors and other people legitimately seeking protection here in the UK will not have access to the same protections as those who come through resettlement. And this is quite deeply alarming to us and to all of the survivors who make it through our doors and who are trying to rebuild their lives here. So I really would urge the Labour Party and all its supporters to get behind the campaign to change this heinous bill that is really an embarrassment to all of us who care about human rights and individuals. Thank you very much.